Hi everyone. It's been a long time since I last spoke expressly about our conservation sector, but I was reminded and encouraged when a recently converted observer of the conservation sector told me, notified me with consternation that Edward Norton had been recently appointed to the board of Kenya Wildlife Service. Now, those who don't know, Edward Norton is a Hollywood actor, an American, who starred in a few films and has some investments in the conservation, while in the tourism sector in Kenya, and purports to be very interested in conserving our wildlife. Now, we need to go back to history to understand this appointment. Personally, I don't share the shock at it, although I take a very dim view of such appointments. And here's why. This is the history. Our conservation sector came up from the National Parks Ordinance, which basically set aside lands for hunting and recreation by Europeans, by settlers. And this is a very important point. They were white spaces. National parks were white spaces. They were created as white spaces. And this has gone on even up to recent years. When I was doing my PhD research, about 15 years ago, kids would still be run away, being scared of being arrested if they were seen fishing for trout in the rivers coming off Mount Kenya, because Africans, blacks, were not allowed to fish for trout, and this memory is still there. I'm not sure what the regulation is, but the memory is still there. But back to the national parks, these were white spaces. And if you look through the history, even, and I'm talking about post colonial history of our conservation sector, there's always been the white, the white, the white gaze in it. And our entire conservation sector was set up to play to the white gallery, to serve the white gaze, whether it was the white settlers, whether it was white hunters, whether it's now in latter day white tourists, and now most recently white conservationists and white environmental saviors, quote unquote. So if you look at recent history of Kenya Wildlife Service, there's always been in not expressly but de facto a reserved place for a white face on the board or in the leadership of the organization. And why I say why we must note this is that non-indigenous Kenyans obviously have a place in our country and in all sectors of our society and economy, but we've never seen a Kenyan of Asian origin ever appointed to anything KWS. And there are many capable ones. I know many Asians who've done a lot of really good work in the conservation sector, even in the tourism sector, and who are very big investors even in the tourism sector, but they've never been considered for that board. But because this is a white space, that's the fact of it. So whether we like it or not, that's just the truth of it. So if we look at the recent past, and we've always been, our wildlife has always ended up being subject to decisions and views of people that are taken because of who they are and their race, not because of their expertise. And my personal experience, in my personal experience, I've seen this. As a student, I was studying carnivore ecology, and I saw in the Aberdares where gentleman called Brian, he who later served on the KWS board, would be part of a group they'd put up meat baits in the Aberdare National Park for lions, and lions would be shot. This is about just over 20 years ago. This is about 2000 2001. They'd shoot lions in an attempt to reduce the lion population because these lions were purported to be a danger to mountain bongo. Yes, this is Kenya Wildlife Service. In our national parks, we have lions being shot one by one, and I don't know the number that eventually got killed, but I know they were enough to provide a very robust sample size of tissue samples which was part of the study I was working on. But this seems absurd, but if it's suggested by a white person, it's fine. That's the fact of it. Later, after having finished my PhD, I served on the KWS Carnival Management Committee. And we'd be dealing with human wildlife conflict issues, carnivore conservation issues. And one day, another board member, who was called Colin Church, submitted a memorandum to the Carnivore Conservation Committee that we must kill at least half the hyena population in the Aberdare National Park because his tourist, he was on a tour and his guests were very upset when they saw the hyenas killing a baby buffalo, or I think it was trying to kill a baby rhino or something. And this was a formal request to us, and people were sort of twiddling their thumbs and wringing their hands because this was a board member, and we I said we should dismiss it out of hand, but because it was a board member, it had to be dealt with delicately. So we embarked on doing a census of hyenas in the Aberdare National Park because we were told to kill 50% of them, and we didn't even know how many they were. So 50% of what? So eventually the culling didn't happen because in the course of the census, etc., things were taken by time. He left the board, etc., and obviously it was a ridiculous, absolutely absurd request from him. But this didn't last. The relative intellectual peace didn't last long. Then we got a request from Ian Craig of Lewa. Again, we need to kill lions because they're eating too many young gravy zebra in Lewa. And at this point, I personally just lost my temper and I said that this is ridiculous. We are here to deal with human wildlife conflict. We are here to deal with the problem if lions are eating someone's cows, goats, or children. We are not here to deal with lions eating zebras. If lions could speak, they'd ask, what are we supposed to eat? And again, he was a board member. Again, the white space. People were wringing their hands. So since I was not a KWS employee, I undertook the task of writing the response and refusal. And I wrote very clearly that we cannot start culling wild animals for eating wild animals in the bush. And once we permit this, and this is a very slippery slope, once we permit people to kill lions, they will come up with a very brilliant idea that it's a waste to let people to kill lions for free. There are people willing to pay $50,000 to kill it. Why don't we invite hunters to kill so we get some money? And there we will be doing sport hunting. And then I realized from the consternation with which it was received, I realized I'd hit the nail on the head. But this is not to blame the people bringing these stupid requests forward. This is to blame us as Kenya for not having any purpose of our own for conservation. And this, I've said several, stems from highest echelons of state. That's why we have some strange thing called Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife. We think wildlife is there for tourism. We think conservation is something we do to serve the interests of tourism. For right now, we have a very powerful, professional Kenya Wildlife Service that, to this moment, still does not understand why it is conserving our natural heritage, because they still think they're doing it for tourism. As I've always said, there are species of animals that tourists will never see or that are not cute or attractive, but we must conserve them all because it's our heritage. And this is the reason why we keep having these strange faces in our board. Recently, it was Jochen Zeitz, who was a German citizen, a wealthy entrepreneur from Germany, and he was there because, as someone explained to me, that he was expected to bring in some donations. Every capitalist is running his own scams. He's not going to give money. When you give him that seat on the board, it will give him prominence to get more money for his own projects, not more money for the organization itself. And that's the same thing. Edward Norton's running his own things. And now his seat on the board of trustees will give him more prominence to get more money for his own things, because all foreign funding for conservation in Kenya is requested or solicited on the basis the proposals all say KWS is hopeless. Give me money so I can help them. Everybody who KWS thinks is a partner in fundraising actually raises funds on the premise that KWS is useless. The KWS is weak. And KWS has started believing that it's weak. They've actually abdicated certain parts of this country. Even the veterinary department is now run by David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, basically. We've seen KWS scientists treating a zebra for injuries from a lion. I'm not sure where that comes from. We've seen them running up and down, treating animals that have been in fights with other animals. This means we don't know what's the definition of wildlife. This is not school or tame life, not animals in a paddock. They're wild, they fight, some eat each other, some die, etc., etc. So we should really rethink why we have our Kenya Wildlife Service. We must completely remodel our conservation sector. And by that, I mean make it something that serves our needs and then welcomes tourists to come and see what it has conserved for us, the people of Kenya. That's what it should be. Right now, this thing was it's like a Rolls Royce which was built those days, and now we are trying to use it as a Land Rover. No, you have to get a Land Rover. We have to have a new purpose, a new structure, new policies. Otherwise, everything we are doing will just be going round and round in circles, making the same blunders. Right now, it was created to serve the white theater, the white gaze, and the leadership there is only based on how well you can serve the white gaze. So I don't even blame the people who are in there. To be competent, you have to serve the white gaze, and you will benefit from that. But until we change the policy, etc., the personnel in there will always struggle to meet their mandate of holding wildlife in trust for the Kenyan people. Right now, they're holding it in trust for somebody, but not us.